now Ian Jessup on CFAX 1070.
Welcome back. Conservative Member of Parliament Michael Chong yesterday introduced his Reform Act. The act has three major proposals. First, caucus members would be able to remove their party leader by majority vote. Second, leaders would no longer hold the power to veto election candidates chosen at the constituency level. And third, party leaders could not decide unilaterally to kick someone out of caucus. Caucus members themselves would decide whether their colleagues were removed or readmitted. Question for the listeners is, what do you think of Michael Chong's bill to limit the power of party leaders? Our number is 386-1161. You can email us at talk@cfax1070.com. Within hours after this bill being introduced in the House of Commons, more than 10,000 Canadians signed a petition in support of the bill on the website Leadnow.ca. Here to talk to us about this issue is Julia Pope, Senior Board Member of Leadnow. Julia, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Julia, first of all, tell our listeners about Leadnow.
So we're an independent pro-democracy campaigning organization with over 300 supporters across the country, and we work on a range of issues ranging from environmental protection, fighting for a fair economy, and to working to improve our democracy, which is a major focus for us.
Now, I was surprised that your petition in support of the Reform Act got more than 10,000 people signing it within hours of the legislation being introduced.
We're actually up to around more than 11,000 letters that have been sent to party leaders and MPs calling for support for the principles behind this bill and asking the parties to commit to a free, open vote on the legislation. And as you probably know, that's a very high response rate for a private member's bill that really wasn't anticipated. And it's rare in Canada to see this level of interest in such a bill, but I think it speaks to the growing disconnect Canadians feel with our government representatives, and with to the sense that there's really something deeply wrong with our democracy. And I think that this bill takes some meaningful steps in the direction of addressing that.
I think you hit it on the head when you talked about the growing discontent with political leaders and politicians. I think people are frustrated. We talk about changing the system. I don't think there's anything wrong with the system. It's the way the parties act once they're in power. And I think what Michael Chong's bill does, it gives those elected representatives who normally would be at the beck and call of the party leader some power within caucus, which they don't have. Do you agree?
I do agree with that. I think it's really important that we take steps to make sure that our MPs can do their job, which is to freely represent their constituents. The Canadian parliamentary system wasn't actually designed for political parties. They arose as a matter of convention. But I would take an exception to the idea that this is not the system that needs to change. I think this is a meaningful enhancement that we need to pursue, but I wouldn't want to close the door to other really vital system changes, like revisiting our broken electoral system that delivers majority governments with just 39% of the popular vote. And I think we probably need to be talking about other reforms to make the Prime Minister's office more accountable and to make Parliament more functional and a more attractive place for people to want to work. The dysfunction in our system plays a large role in keeping good citizens from wanting to step forward and to run for office and to be leaders in their communities. And I think that this bill, by empowering MPs and having this discussion about what it would take to create a more functional, healthy political system, would go a long way to addressing the deficit of leadership and the culture of dysfunction that has been naturalized in the Canadian political system.
Well said. Let's go to the phone lines and talk to Joe. Joe, you're on CFAX. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Does this bill include a clause that says party leaders are no longer allowed to nominate candidates?
This bill contains a clause that gives the authority, the ultimate authority on candidate nomination to the local constituency. So, yes, it removes their veto/approval power and puts that solely in the hands of local electoral district associations.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this is something that is long overdue. Just think here in BC. If we had something like that in BC, we would not have had to go through all what we went through with the HST. Sure, it's gone, but if politicians had done the job they were elected to do, it never would have gone that far.
Great, thanks. Appreciate your call, Joe.
Okay.
Thank you. Let's go through these proposals of Michael Chong's in his bill. Julia, the first is caucus members would be able to remove their party leader by majority vote. That seems pretty fair.
Yeah, and we think that that's a really important and vital safety valve that caucuses need to be able to exercise in between normal leadership races. This would empower MPs to to make sure that their leader is kept in check, and to kind of restore us to the original principles of our Westminster system, which see the leaders of parties and in fact the Prime Minister as being first among equals and fundamentally accountable to their caucuses and accountable to the legislative branch of government, which is the philosophy that our system was founded on, but is something that in practice has been eroded much to the detriment and the functionality of our government system.
The second one which is an issue that's gotten a lot of leaders of political parties in trouble, and it says the leaders would no longer hold the power to veto election candidates chosen at the constituency level, which was something that Joe was referred to. That's pretty straightforward as well.
Yeah, it's fairly straightforward. That is one of the kind of major threats that leaders of parties are able to levy against MPs. It's a huge intimidating factor to know that if you run afoul of your party leader and refuse to toe the party line over something that maybe even your constituents really want you to do or don't want you to do, that they can revoke your ability to seek re-election under the party banner. And we know that independents face a real uphill battle in running for office, and that this power in particular is one of the things that really holds MPs in check. And we know that that's a great source of shame for many MPs. The Samara Foundation in Toronto did a series of interviews with former parliamentarians, and many spoke to the fact that there were many incidents over their career where they wanted to break ranks with their party, to vote to give voice to what they believed were the best interests of their constituents, and that they felt that they were unable to do that because of the intimidation around being not allowed to seek nomination under the party banner, being expelled from caucus, the threat that party leaders can revoke a caucus member's privileges or strip them of their critic duties or cabinet duties. So this is a really important mechanism to strengthen the ability of MPs to exercise the agency and the license that they're elected to exercise. And this is held in check a bit by the other provision in the bill, which allows MPs to determine whether a given caucus member gets to sit in their caucus. So if there were an MP theoretically that was radically out of sync with the values of the party and the trajectory of the party, that then caucus would have the authority to decide whether that individual should continue to sit as a member of the party caucus. And they also would dictate the terms of the re-entry of someone if they were expelled.
I think that is a wonderful provision in the bill, because how many times have we heard all across the country, and here in British Columbia as well, where members of caucus have spoken out and the leaders expelled them? And I think it should be up to the colleagues of this individual to determine that individual's fate, and I think this is what this legislation does.
I would absolutely agree with that, and I would also say that it's a profound source of instability in a political party to have unaccountable leadership and to have leadership taking action that's not supported by the will of a majority of caucus. And a BC example would be, the ejection of the New Democrat MLA Bob Simpson from the NDP caucus back a couple years ago, which triggered a whole chain of events that everybody can probably remember. Certainly your listenership in Victoria is probably familiar with it. Those kind of situations where you have the ability to make a decision like that without the support of caucus, that really produces a lot of instability. And ultimately that's not good for democracy, and it's not good for the people who serve in government or for their constituents.
Julia, based on the reaction you've seen from other political leaders, characterize it for us.
The reaction from other political leaders, the most fascinating thing I've ever seen in Canadian politics. It is really amazing to see who is speaking out in support of this. We've seen MPs from across the political spectrum cautiously stepping up to express their support for the bill, including the NDP Democratic reform critic Craig Scott. Liberal Party leader Justin Trudeau has spoken favorably about it, as has Thomas Mulcair, who said that there will be a free vote on the bill. Green Party leader Elizabeth May is incredibly supportive of the bill, and we heard recently from a Canadian Press report yesterday that as many as 40 Conservative MPs may be planning to vote in favor of this bill. And it's also interesting to note that the bill was seconded by Conservative Member of Parliament James Rajat from Leduc, who's a highly respected member of the Conservative caucus and is currently the Finance Committee chair. So that kind of strong signal from principled, respected Conservatives is very interesting and suggests that this bill, with cross-partisan support from the other opposition parties, that it may actually have a fighting chance and could make it all the way through.
It's not like this bill is revolutionary, because what we're talking about here is already underway in Australia and Great Britain, is it not?
Yeah, there are other Westminster democracies do use have a caucus accountability mechanism that's enshrined in their operation. I was actually in Australia for the federal elections. I had a front row seat to that race, and a lot of people point to Australia, saying that this is not a good path to follow. But it's important to remember that in Australia. None of the parties, or the Labour Party at the time, was electing its leaders from the caucus. In the case of all of the Canadian political parties, they use most of them use one member, one vote leadership contests. And if there were a leadership review and a leader was asked to resign under the provisions of this bill, that a temporary leader would be elected by the caucus, but the ultimate decision-making power would reside with the membership of the party, according to its traditions, to select a new leader. So this doesn't go completely the other direction of giving caucus the power to elect a leader, but it does give caucus the power to ensure that the leader maintains the confidence of caucus.
Julie, it was great to talk to you. I appreciate this. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Much appreciated. And if your listeners want to go to Leadnow.ca, they can join us in calling for parties to support this bill.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Julie Pope, Senior Board Member of Leadnow.ca. We'll take a break and come right back.